Felcha, this is Under Butler, and this is a recent little drawing I quickly threw together. With the following video I will be discussing the difference between doing some thumbnailing of ideas and what I did here, which is run straight into it. A thing I repeatedly said I shall stop doing, but I keep doing nonetheless. It's a bit of a poor habit. And the difference becomes really clear with the piece after this one, where the same character has a different design and a far more interesting composition, purely down to doing some thumbnailing beforehand. What I should begin with, though, is that this is a preliminary design a friend requested, a voodoo doll, mixed with an owl, a Voodhoo-hoot, if you will. Given that I was wanting to keep within a relatively plushy style, this should have been a golden concept. However, what I noticed is that I strayed a little bit away from that. The appendages narrowing so much at the base and the general lack of chunkiness do not help with making this plushy effect. An approach where I treat appendages a bit more like dough or sausages is probably the best option. Even if it's got a narrowing side, say like a bridie or a Cornish pasty, it gives more cuddliness, more plushy effect to it. That or I might be slightly hungry. I'm also struggling somewhat with making the big, discus, imposing eyes, whilst introducing the button eye element. This is odd, given that owls are often depicted with these large, overbearing, all-knowing eyes. Even some owls, such as the barn owl, have very distinctive, large fields of white around their eyes, giving off that impression. So it makes a little less sense that this element is a bit of what I'm struggling with when bringing it into this bumble creature style. This is likely due to how this style has largely had the eyes offset somewhat to the side of the head, and being quite blank, but the owl's head being largely circular too doesn't help, with very little detail in it other than the beak and maybe the eyebrows. The eyebrows may actually be the largest issue with it, as it interrupts the shape of the eye, and it kind of depletes the amount of googly eyedness it can have, if that's a word. It may also be that the head really isn't sculpted much in the design, and it thus looks very generic and undescriptive, less distinct. These really feed into why I'm not 100% happy with the amount of presence this character has. They don't really feel like they are there, and this is likely down to the lack of chunkiness, and that the lasing on the stump doesn't really feel legitimate or real. They do seem a little disconnected. I also have slightly mixed feelings on the stump. I feel like I could have done a better job on the detail. I feel like it's a bit of an odd mesh of stylistic choices as it is, when it might have been better to simplify and focus more on distinctive blocking of areas, to give a better general idea of the area, of the scene. The gown is a bit choppy in terms of how it's done, especially when you compare it to the sky, where it got a little bit more feeling in it. Even then, the sky could have been improved with slightly more detail in the form of clouds or just wisps of them. But why am I disappointed with this? Well, this can only really be answered by looking at what I want to do with the art going forward. At the moment, and for a fairly long time, I've focused largely just on singular characters, often not dealing with any environment detail around them at all. In that instance, the most important thing to do is explore the characters and make them distinctive, have their visual design reflect them as a character. In this way, failing to do thumbnails means I go with just my initial whim, missing out on the more interesting ways of presenting the character, as well as more interesting designs for the character to begin with, in terms of their personality within their outwards expression. And often these little details come out once you do some thumbnailing, as you come up with more varied and interesting ideas after you exhaust the obvious ones to begin with. As you keep going down that hole, you will find more interesting things at that bottom of that particular well. So this hasn't made the piece inherently bad, but it has meant it lacks some of the further development that could have been done with just a little extra work before diving in. And this is why I need to focus on changing my workflow, especially if I want to do more interesting, intricate pieces, such as the one I'm doing of a jewel portrait at the moment. This will be even more important with my change of employment affecting my available time to work on art. What I will likely do is do a lot more exploratory work, so quick rough sketches, art practices and composition concepts, and likely I will write more on these on this channel, whilst posting completed works slightly differently, focusing more on specific critique in a more edited form, while still showing the full process. However, I am working on building assets and frameworks for doing that sort of work, and will likely continue with these smaller overarching looks of smaller speed paints for the little while. Thank you for listening to this rather incoherent ramble, and until next time, Martian Lev and Drast.